Hi, everyone. It's a new episode of Three Makes Baby, and I am here with a guest named Freya. I'm going to let her tell you more about herself, but she was so kind. We were going to do this a couple of weeks ago, and then I got the worst cold ever, and we rescheduled. And so thank you so much, Freya, for doing that. And I would love for you to tell everyone about yourself. Well, first of all, I'll tell you all that's listening that I basically kind of connected with Freya on Instagram because there was a lot of conversation happening a couple of weeks ago around donor conception. And I saw something she posted, and honestly, I can't remember which post it is now, but I thought I've got to reach out to her and learn more about your perspective. So, and now I just realized I probably should have asked you what your pronoun is as well.
It's she, her. Yeah.
Okay. So I didn't screw that one up. Okay.
No.
Okay. Very good. Awesome. Well, tell me more about yourself.
So I'm Freya. I'm from the UK. I am donor conceived. I have two mums. They used a donor in the 90s, an anonymous sperm donor to conceive me.
Okay.
And I have then gone on. I came out myself when I was 14 as queer, and got married in 2016 to my wife. And last year we had our daughter, and we conceived our daughter Birdie via a donor sperm. So obviously we've kind of gone at it from both angles.
Yes.
And yeah, it's been a unique experience, and I've started sort of writing to try and gather all of that information really, and that personal knowledge together, really.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like when I first reached out to you, I like what you had to say, but I had no idea like who you were. I didn't know anything. And so the depth of your story must have just came through somehow. You are in such a unique position because of your experience, and especially because of what we've been talking about lately on social media. We've been talking more for those that don't have a social media account and just listen to the podcast. There's been a lot coming up. It's been hitting the media, conversations about donor conception. There's been donor conceived representation at the ASRM, which is a conference that here in the United States that is hosted. It's basically the board that puts forth ethics and guidelines for endocrinologists. And then on top of that, I have been in constant communication with a lady named Jenna Jaffe, who is going to be co-authoring a book, Three Makes Baby, but that is LGBTQ plus friendly, and that is adapted to be, Three Makes Baby is heteronormative, so we want to have a book that's available for the community. So much is just happening out there, and then maybe that's how we cross paths, is because that conversation's really been coming up a lot more. And I don't. Do you follow Jenna?
I don't, but after I saw you speak about her at some point, I've sort of started following her now.
Oh yeah.
Because it's fascinating, and it's important, I think, to be done, definitely.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and I think that's also important because when we're speaking about the topic of donor conception and parenting, is that there's such unique and different perspectives, and we want to really be respectful and honor the uniqueness of different families. And I know that a lot of times it's important for LGBTQ plus to hear from another person with that same lived experience. And so the fact that you were raised by two moms, and you and your wife have had a child through donor sperm, you have completely experienced it from, as a child and now as an adult.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that there aren't many of us out there. There are definitely a few of us, but there aren't many.
No, there really aren't. And so hearing from you is really important. What did you, when you used donor sperm, was it anonymous, unknown? What, I know in the UK
so it's open identity release. So my daughter will be able to contact her donor when she turns 18.
Okay. And that's through the UK donation program?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That was through a clinic in the UK. Yeah.
And then was there a long wait list for you? Because that's been the kind of I guess that's what people have said since I've been doing this, is that there can be a really long wait list in the UK.
Well, we went private in the end.
Okay.
If we had gone via the NHS, I think there is a 2-year waiting list potentially, from speaking to others that are going through it that way. But we ended up going privately, and we're incredibly lucky because we used IUI and were successful the first time. So the costs were kept considerably down. If it had taken a few goes, it might have been that we would have had to gone back to the NHS and asked for assistance with that. But we were lucky in that respect.
Yeah. And since you grew up donor conceived, did you know anything about your donor? I'm sorry, not about your donor, about your parents' donor.
Yeah, so I don't mind using my donor. I tend to call him my donor. I know a lot of donor conceived people don't, but I grew up saying my donor. But I know when I was conceived, it was anonymous, lifelong anonymity for sperm donors. That law didn't change until 2005. So no, I grew up very much knowing I'd never know my donor. But I didn't really have much of an issue with that. I was always curious about siblings, and I knew that was a possibility when I turned 18. So that was definitely more my focus. When I was growing up, I didn't really have much interest in getting to know about my donor. I had the basic information of hair color, eye color, and occupation, and that was kind of enough for me for most of my life, really.
Yeah. And then still to this day, do you still feel that way?
Well, I had the sort of bizarre luck of finding my donor through a genealogy website a year ago.
Oh, wow.
So that was not something I was setting out to do when I signed up for ancestry.com. I was just purely doing it as a Christmas present. And I kind of maybe hoped I'd find some siblings, actually. That was a possibility. But when it first came back, it was all kind of third, fourth cousins. And I kind of forgot about it until I got an email saying that someone was a second cousin. And I was like, oh, that's a little bit closer than I've been getting. And we sort of set to trying to find out where we were related. But I said from the get-go, I don't know half of my DNA, so I won't know if we're connected on that side. I'm not going to know. And this woman turned around and said, oh, I think I know who your dad is. I mean, not the correct terminology, but that's what she said in an email. She said, I think I know who your dad is. And then she vanished. And I didn't hear back from her for a while. And I forgot because I was heavily pregnant and I didn't really care, to be honest. I wasn't thinking about it. I thought she was bluffing as well. I thought there's no way that someone that's a second cousin is going to know who my donor is. And then I got an email in the middle of the night from her saying, my guess was correct. I got him to do a paternity DNA test. Here you go, and gave me his email, purely out of the blue. So it was really unexpected. Wow. But since then we've connected and we've met up a few times, and we've got a lovely kind of growing relationship, which is not something I ever expected to have, really.
Yeah. Did you email him?
I did, yeah. I think I waited a day and then sort of composed myself and sent him an email. And he sent a very lovely, eloquent one back.
Yeah. Was it nerve-wracking? Was it exciting? Was it both?
It was a bit of both, really. I think I rewrote it quite a few times, and then decided to just go for it. And I think my first sentence was saying, I know that you signed up for lifelong anonymity, so I do understand if you have no interest in speaking. And I didn't want to go in there kind of ambushing him, because really I had to respect the fact that even whether it's right or wrong, that's how he had signed up to do this, 26 years ago. And there might be absolutely no interest on his behalf on contacting me, and I was at peace with that. So I kind of wanted to make sure he knew that from the start. But even though he came back, he said he was very shocked to find out he had any offspring. And I thought that was bizarre, because I said to my wife, what did he think he was doing when he was donating sperm?
I know, right?
But I think it took him a little bit of time to get his head around the fact that not only did I exist, but he had others out there that I could put him in contact with. Yes, I think it took him longer than me to come around to the idea, really.
Did it? Yeah, I think sometimes young guys back then especially just almost thought of it like donating plasma or blood.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
He told me he was purely doing it to pay the rent, which I respected, really. I think he was a student and he needed a bit of extra cash, and that was how it was put to him in those days. It was very much, you'll have no contact at all with these children, and here you go, here's a check, see you later.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and now it's changing quite a bit.
It is, yeah. Thankfully.
Yeah. Thankfully. So what did you growing up, what was it like? I know you said you weren't really curious, but how was it talked about? Like, did your moms talk about it with you about being donor
Yeah,
conceived?
I always say that I knew from before. I don't remember ever not knowing that I was donor conceived. And I've asked them to recall those conversations they had with me, and they honestly don't remember, because I think it was just so normal. They didn't have books in those days. There were no kind of, this is how we made you books. I mean, they could have made their own, but I think they just kind of thought, we'll just go with it. And I really grew up having no questions, really. We did talk about it a lot. We mainly talked about the prospect of finding siblings when I was older. My mum was super curious about that. And we spent a lot of time talking about whether there were lots of us, or what they were like, or whether they lived near us. But there really wasn't much talk about the donor. Occasionally we talked about his profession, which I always think is very funny now, because my parents were told when they chose, well, I say chose the donor, in those days it wasn't quite the same. The doctor chose the donor really for them.
Yeah.
But when they were given the donor, they were told that he was a street musician in his spare time. And my parents loved this, because they're both professional musicians. So they thought, brilliant, let's have a bit of music in there as well. And they really remembered that, and they talked about it a lot. And I know that my mum said when she went to like Covent Garden in London, which is where I was conceived, she'd often sort of look out to see if there was someone that looked like me. But then when I did meet my donor 26 years later, he turned around and said, no, I've never been a street musician.
Oh, no.
But his friend that donated at the same time was.
They got him mixed up.
So the anecdotal information was just passed down and mixed up along
it was
the way.
Mixed up.
It was. It really was the Wild West of donating back then.
It really, it was. And that's so, but for sure, because you didn't DNA test that it was him. It's just somehow they mixed up the descriptors of, I wonder if it's on the other donor's file. I wonder if it says the traits about your donor.
That would be interesting. Yeah. I would be very interested to see what information they held, really, because it was so barely any of it was really filed properly or held that way. Like my donor got to know the doctor at the clinic very well, so all of it was very pally, and it was very much word of mouth type thing. It wasn't really something that was formally written down and handed over.
It's true. And then what did you find out? What does he do for a living? What's his profession?
He's now a teacher, which is lovely. And I think that if that had been written down, my mum would have adored that as well. So that's quite nice. My mum passed away. My biological mum passed away 5 years ago. So all of this journey's been without her, which is a shame. And I know that it's nice now, because she really would have got on well with my donor. They both listen to Radio 4. They both, sorry, that's quite a British thing. They both like they are very intelligent. They both like doing things like crosswords. Sorry, that is my dog in the background. Apologies.
No, that's okay. No, I can barely hear it. No worries.
Oh, good. But no, it's nice meeting him now and seeing the bits that would not have been able to have been put in a profile, and yet still knowing that my mum would have picked him. That's kind of reassuring in a way.
Absolutely. That makes sense. And for you, it's like, I can hear the kind of the smile on your face. Like for you, it's like, to know that they would have gotten along, it probably feels good.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's sort of, in reality, isn't that important. In the end, he's made me already. um,
Mm-hmm.
and that bit has been done. But I think just knowing that someone that is so connected to me in that biological way,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
that he would have got on with the person that also made me in that
Mm-hmm.
biological way, that's a big thing that I don't think I ever considered growing up,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't really consider until the last year.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing that he is the kind of person that would have just existed in my life anyway,
Mm-hmm.
um, that's good. I think if we'd met and there was nothing in common, and there was sort of, we were from very different walks of life, it would have not maybe changed our connection, but it would have had that sort of jarring feel to it, that I don't know, that there was that difference, and he wasn't a part of my life in anything but biology.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know really how that would have felt, but I know that it wouldn't have felt like it does now. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have had that same kind of warmth to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you, how do you feel about it being, since you've got the experience yourself of
Mm.
being conceived through using a donor, and then now your child Birdie is, I love that
Mm.
name, is was conceived that way. What unique kind of perspective or message could you share?
I think I've realized how important talking about it is. I think too many people are afraid of the stigma, or are afraid of people finding it strange, or sort of finding it weird. I think that people don't like it, it's not something they discuss with anyone apart from their sort of direct family. But I think all that does is create more hidden depths to it, and it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't need to be like that. It needs to be much more accepted as just a way that people make their family.
Mm-hmm.
And I very much went into my childhood and my adulthood being like that. I talk about it to everybody. I'm really open about it, and I think that that's because I meet too many people in my life that have never heard of it,
Mm-hmm.
and people that are shocked by it, or surprised, or they sort of haven't even considered that that could be how someone makes their family. And I think that shouldn't be the case. I really think it needs to be so normal that by the time Birdie gets to school, it's, yeah, sure, that's, and Tommy over there has got an egg donor as a, like, it should be
Mm-hmm.
that normality. It should
Mm-hmm.
be just something else. It should be, just as Birdie's going to be going to school saying, I've got two mums, the way that she's made shouldn't also be something else that's, alien.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think people are scared that there's not going to be the same connection as well. I know that a lot of mums go into that if they're not the biological mum. Obviously, I'm coming at it from a donor sperm. I know it's the same with egg donors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But my wife was really reassured by the fact that she has seen my relationship with my other mum.
Mm-hmm.
And we have no shared biology. And my parents split when I was 8.
Okay.
So she didn't sort of even, she wasn't even in my household from the age of 8. And yet we have the strongest relationship.
Hmm.
We talk every day. I think I drive her nuts. I ring her about absolutely everything. She is who I turn to for absolutely everything. And I think that my wife, seeing that from the start of our relationship and knowing how close we are, she really didn't have many fears at all going into being the non-biological parent.
Mm.
And I think that people are scared that people will meet the donor, that the donor conceived child will meet their donor, and that maybe they will lose that connection with the non-biological parent. And that's just not the case. I know when people talk about having a second child, they say that your heart doesn't split in two, it doubles.
Doubles, yeah.
And that is the case, that you're welcoming someone else into your world, into your family, and they aren't going to replace anything, because there isn't something to replace. They are an entirely different person. They are an entirely different part of that unit.
Mm-hmm.
And I introduced my donor and my non-biological mum a few months ago, and it was an incredibly weird experience. I won't lie, it was strange. And everyone was nervous, and
Yeah.
yet it went really well. And I know that I saw my non-biological mum, she's called Nikki. I saw Nikki
Mm-hmm.
sit there, and she had a strange look on her face, and she was looking between the two of us. And when we asked, she said it's just that she has spent so many years wondering what he looks like, that now he's sat there, she's having to kind of resolve all of those thoughts.
Yeah.
And afterwards she said it was weird, but she was glad she did it, and she said the next time it won't be as weird. And hearing her happily say the next time was lovely. It was nice knowing that she wasn't writing it off as, all right, I've done that, I don't want to do it again.
Yeah.
But I think that I've spoken to a lot of people that have used a donor that have expressed to me that they are scared that if their child meets the donor down the line, that they won't love them as much now because they've met the person that's given them their DNA. And it just doesn't, it really doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work like that. It doesn't even make
No.
sense. It doesn't make sense.
No.
No. I mean,
it really isn't the case, but
I think that there's more than enough love for us to share. And I can imagine being in that moment that your mom was in, that Nikki was in, where she was looking at that going, oh, all this time I've wondered, and here's the answer. And there's just something so profound about that, you know. Definitely. And she loves you. And so to see this person, you in this person, and this person in you, is like, there's this sense of familiarity there that's just hard to explain. It's hard
the familiarity is I think that's the strangest thing really about the whole experience, that there is a familiarity that I didn't ever think was the case. I was potentially quite cynical, really. I think I thought that he was just purely someone that has given me half of my DNA and that was it. And I think maybe that was because I grew up thinking I was never going to know him. So there was a part of me that had to become a little bit hardened without even realizing it. And so once I opened my mind to the fact that I could know him, there is a familiarity. And he was walking up to the door the first time that he came over, and he just came and gave me a hug, and you just have like it feels like you've known him for a while, and not in this big fanfare way of like, oh my God, it's you, but just in that kind of, oh, it's you. Like, exactly. It's, that's fair enough. That's who I was expecting. And it's kind of, there is a recognition there. There
is a recognition. And I think when, lately I've been talking with so many people and really trying to sort out the idea that being connected or having recognizing that familiarity that you just mentioned, or that we talked about, that somehow that is like perpetuating a heteronormative narrative, and that it is homophobic or transphobic and things like that. And that is the last thing, would ever want for the message of genetic identity to convey, that it has to be that, because that is, and I don't know how to explain it. Maybe you have some words, but I think what you just said kind of that's what led me to that. I was like, well, maybe that's how we can explain it. It's just like almost like a genetic familiarity that somehow it matters, but it doesn't have to do with like social parenting or raising a family or anything like that.
No, exactly. And I think I was listening to one of your episodes the other day, and you'd said that lots of people say that you're only showing the bad side of it, which is not the case. But I think I was never sad about I'm still not sad about being donor conceived. There is not one part of me that regrets how I was made. And there never will be. I am very happy with the way that I was raised with two incredibly loving parents. I had everything I needed. I was not lacking for anything. And I didn't grow up feeling like I was missing anything. There was never that. All it is an addition. I've not been missing anything. It's just extra. That's it. And I think that, and I hope my daughter feels the same. And I'm going into it knowing that she is her own person, and maybe there might be some other feelings there. And I hope I'm prepared for that. But really, I know that she is not missing anything. She's not lacking a parent there. She has two loving parents. I have two loving parents, or one loving parent if you've got a single parent by choice, but you have a unit, you have a family. That person that helped make you is just that. They're just an extra person that, because of the way your family is created, they happen to be there. And welcoming them in, and recognizing that there is going to be a different connection there to the people that have raised you, to the social parents, to the people that you've seen every day and that have gone to your ballet concerts and that have, paid for
Mm-hmm.
school meals, those people are always going to be completely different to the person that has given you half of your DNA.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't ignore the fact that there will also be some form of relationship or connection there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just knowing that it's not threatening. It's
Yes.
knowing that it
Yes.
it will exist whether you ignore it or not, or whether you call it something else.
It's true. Yeah.
And that tends to be, from what I've seen, that the reason a lot of donor conceived people have a lot of anger is because of the fact they've been lied to, if they have been lied to. And there's a super easy way of fixing that, and it's just never trying to force that relationship into being anything else, and never hiding it and not pushing it to the back and hoping your kid doesn't ask about it,
Mm-hmm.
because they will. There's always going to be a point they do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, if you go into it scared that your child is going to be angry with you or they're going to hate you, it sets up that relationship with this horrible kind of dark cloud over it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're going into it with interest as well and curiosity, you are surprised. I think people are surprised by the fact that they can welcome this person in because of who they are and what they've done, and it doesn't take anything away at all.
Yeah. You can welcome the person in and it doesn't take anything away. And I think that's a really good way to say it. And I think it's certainly, as far as you said, those who were told late have added trauma, added betrayal and trust and issues that they have to work through, grief and just identity disruption and lots of different things going on. I know that speaking to so many donor conceived people over the years, that they do, that there does tend to be a tendency of kind of like, how we, like, as people, we like to throw things like in either or categories, which we need to, of course, that's the whole goal, is to not see things as either or. And so when sometimes parents, when they want to, they're hoping for the best, and I understand this, and they think, well, if I tell my child early, then my child's not going to be like the donor conceived people that are speaking out. They're not going to be angry, or they're not going to be as quote unquote bad off. Okay. I'm putting that in quotes, because I don't think, for those of you that are donor conceived and listening, that you're bad off. I think this. I think that you're advocating now, and you're making meaning out of your story. And that is healing. That's the arc of healing. That's how we as humans overcome any kind of story that's been difficult for us, anything under the sun, really, that is difficult, that we've been through. We make meaning out of it often by advocating for others and trying to make a difference in the world. So it's a beautiful thing. So this is a long way of saying that just because you tell early doesn't mean that there could still be some negative feelings in adulthood. Yeah. So I think there is this idea that some parents will say, oh, if I tell early, it's, everything will be fine. And hey, maybe it will be. And I'm like one to think it's going to be fine anyway. It's just in terms of, even if you go through hard times, even if there's negative feelings, even if there's anger, that doesn't mean you're not going to be fine.
Yeah, and it's not a matter of just ticking a box either. I think a lot of people think that they have a checklist of how to do it right.
Yeah, and that's true. Yeah,
and it really doesn't. I mean, I've been fully aware of the fact that I could think I'm doing everything right, but my daughter could have completely opposing views than I do, because we're 27 years later, and things have changed, and also there could be just completely different social factors as she's growing up, and I'm not going to be able to predict any of that. All I can do is going into it, be as prepared as I can, and navigate each conversation as it comes up. And I think a lot of people I've spoken to think, oh well, you'll be able to handle it. I had the implications counselling before we used the fertility clinic, and they ended up asking me more questions than I asked them.
I'm sure they did.
But I kind of wanted to be like, I still don't really know. I'm still a new parent, or not even a parent then. I was like, I still don't know what I'm doing. And I think there's been a kind of an assumption that those of us that are dual citizens, or at both sides of it, that we know what we're doing. But I think in the end, I don't think any parent knows what they're doing. I think we hope for the best, and we go into it as open-minded as we can, and and we do our best.
Yeah. And I now really touch on, I I can relate to that too, because I was adopted and we adopted my daughter. And I remember going to the adoption agency and I was all, I had a happy childhood and a happy story. And
Mm.
so I was going in and I was like, okay, adoption, yay, it's all good. We're so excited. And the coordinator was like, well, how do you feel, about adoption? I'm like, great. She's like, this was actually our home study. And she said, well, she looks at me straight, stern eyes, stern eyebrows. Your daughter might not feel the same way about adoption that you do. And I remember it's like she smacked me in the face. And I remember going, what? How dare you? How dare you say? But I let that sink in. I thought about it and I was so glad she said it to me that straight up, because as it came, as it would turn out, is that my daughter wasn't happy about it at all at first. And we had a trouble in the beginning. So it would have been a real shock to the system that if I thought that her adoption story was going to be just like my adoption story. And
Yeah.
it was different, they're different. So I love that you said that, because it's true. I mean, and so what I do is I talk about distinguishing a kind of us as parents, but from our children. It's so common for us to, I think, put our stuff onto our kids. They're little
Yeah.
versions of us, or we're going to live vicariously through us. I mean, how many movies are made about that? But when we try to not do that, that's distinguishing. So we're distinguishing their story and our story are very different, and honoring that difference. So yeah, I love that you said that. So how then, and then you don't have to share if you don't want to, but then did you use you used identity release at 18? Will you think about pursuing content before that, or is that not something you're able to do, or how does it work with the
We
agent?
we go back and forth, I'll be honest.
Mm-hmm.
When we initially were going to start our parenting journey, we were looking at Cryos, the sperm bank in Denmark. And that was a very different approach. We could look at baby photos, we could look at, it was a lot more familiar. And I loved that. And I was very invested in it. And we found out just before we started that the laws had changed in the UK and they will no longer ship sperm to a home address. So we weren't able to do home insemination, which had been our plan for years. And we were gutted, and sort of overnight our plans changed. So we booked in with a clinic and we found that clinic wouldn't accept sperm anywhere apart from their bank. So again, everything changed. And we ended up we looked at their profiles, and it didn't take very long until we found a donor that we really liked. And he'd mentioned in his profile that he specifically wanted to help LGBT couples. That was really important to me. I wanted to know the donor was going to be, wasn't going to be homophobic, or wasn't going to be we weren't going to find him when Birdie was 18 and he was going to be this sort of closed-minded human being.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we kind of started to come around to the idea of using a donor from this bank. And I sat with the idea of bringing my daughter into a world where she again wasn't going to know her donor until 18. And I think that the more I thought about it, the more I thought that I was knowing that there was going to be that chance at 18 was enough for me then. And then after finding my donor purely by chance after she was born, I thought more about it again. And I think that we will probably keep coming back to the idea of looking earlier, because I don't like my daughter not having the option. I think that's something that I worry about. I worry that she is going to be kind of held back from finding half of her DNA until she's an adult, when I know that as a teenager I was ready then, if that had been my option.
Yeah.
But I really don't like the idea of sending her DNA off when she is a child. I know that a lot of people do. And I've had conversations with people that have done it for their children when they've been very young. But there are so many issues there that I think worry me. I don't like the idea of doing it without her consent. I don't think she can consent until a certain point. And I think even as a teenager, I know I happily said yes to many things as a teenager that I shouldn't have. And I think that would really scare me, of making a decision there that she couldn't herself legally. And then there is also the fear of, what if we find the donor by chance too young and he isn't happy about the fact that we have broken the the legal sort of side of things that we signed at the clinic, saying that he wouldn't be found until she was 18. Yeah, it's really something that we have not settled on.
Yeah. Did you watch our live on Instagram about it?
No, I didn't. It's something I meant to watch before speaking to you, but no, I haven't yet.
It's funny because we addressed those exact two things that you
Yeah,
said. Yeah.
I'll
And
definitely have to give that a watch, because it's I wish that I was sort of comfortable settling on one decision, but I think it's going to be something that we ricochet back and to one
yeah.
while she's
Well,
little.
yeah. And well, what you'll see is at the end, I said, it's a complex decision. It's not an easy answer. So I had to make a decision tree. So I made like this entire, like, okay, if this, then this, and one of the things in the decision tree, which I'm still tweaking and trying to refine it just to be sure I haven't forgotten anything. So I'm having people look at it, that I haven't left anything out, is that if you can connect, if you feel like you do about putting her DNA out there, if there's a way, if there are other ways to find biological relatives, and one way is half siblings or siblings, depending on what you call them. So has that something, do you have an avenue there you could pursue?
Yeah, I mean, again, in the UK, that's not something that you can apply for information about her half siblings at any point. So we could apply now and find out if she has any yet. But all we would get back is the year they were born and their gender. And it would only be again when she's 18, she could sign up to the same thing that I've signed up to, which is the donor sibling link. And she would then be told if there are any matches, if any of her siblings have signed up. But something that I've sort of been interested in is the fact that people are starting kind of very informal, but like on Facebook, they're using the donor number and finding anyone there that's used that donor number. They're using the donor sibling registry. And so there are definitely ways of doing that earlier. And me and my wife, again, have sort of said, I think we'll keep checking in. But if she started asking questions, we want to be prepared to help her look when she's younger, in ways that aren't potentially submitting her DNA. But like you say, there are definitely other ways out there. And so I've put her donor number on the donor sibling registry to see if anyone had used the same, and they haven't yet. But she was we were the first couple, I think, to have a successful pregnancy using this donor. So we were aware of the fact it could be a little bit. But yeah, I think siblings is something that I'm much more interested in searching for with her from a younger age, because I know that I grew up, again, I'm potentially projecting my own experiences onto her, but I grew up knowing it almost felt like a slightly less intense version of finding the other half of you, the other side of your DNA. Less intense than finding the donor, but still having some answers there. And really all I was curious growing up was whether they looked like me. I didn't really have any other questions. I purely wanted to know if there were people out there walking around that looked like me and my sister. That was kind of it. It kind of is, I'll be honest, at 27. That's my main thing whenever we find a new sibling. It tends to be, oh, do they look like me? That's definitely a priority. I don't know why. It must be something to do with how we see ourselves and see ourselves reflected.
See ourselves reflected, and just maybe the variation of genetic expression too that can come from similar genes and DNA. It is really fascinating, and I can relate to that too. And I think a lot of people, I think DCPs would definitely fall into that category. Like you're not alone. And that, but then there are others that want to know more and maybe want to have a relationship. So there's so many different stories and perspectives out there.
Definitely.
And that's why I did this podcast, is so I can talk to lots of people and get lots of different perspectives about, at different stages of their life too, about experiencing a family through donor conception. What did you mention at the beginning? Did you carry Birdie?
I did, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm the biological parent of Birdie. Yeah.
So you didn't do a reciprocal IVF?
We didn't know. We talked about it, but very briefly, to be honest. I think my we'd always for years said that we'd take it in turns, carrying. And then as we sort of settled into our relationship, and my wife is quite, she's not butch, but she's butcher than me. And she had no real interest in being pregnant. She really could not picture it. And so it became it will be me. And then we had the conversation of, well, if you're not going to carry, do you want it to be your egg? And I think when we looked into it and we started, well, we'd originally wanted to do home insemination. We wanted to keep it as less clinical as possible. And that obviously wouldn't allow for reciprocal IVF that way. But when we knew we'd have to go through a clinic, we still said we wanted to keep it as less clinical, I'm sure there's a better term there, as natural, I guess, as possible. And so we knew we'd go through IUI really if we could. And I said to her, well, is that going to upset you? There is, you're not a part, in oh my God, inverted commas, that's the word I'm looking for. You're not a part of the child that we're making.
Like genetically, yeah.
And she said, really, she's like, again, she's seen the relationship that I have with Nikki, and she said, I don't think I need to be any part of that process to feel a connection to our child. And she's like, I don't want us to put ourselves through the needles and the egg retrievals that comes with IVF. She's like, I think that would be, it wasn't what we needed really as a family. And occasionally we talk about it again, and she still says the second Birdie was born, she was hers. That was, she didn't feel there was any moment where she was lacking in that they didn't have the same connection that me and Birdie have. And it sort of ended up being very much no, we don't need that. I know some couples, actually many of my friends have gone down that route. And I think it's fascinating. I love learning about it. I love seeing the fact that it can connect to their child being pregnant, even though there is no genetic sort of bond there. And I think it's super interesting, but I think that we quite quickly decided that wasn't what we wanted, really.
Okay. Yeah. And so far she's not feeling left out.
Right? No.
Good.
No, definitely not. I think potentially occasionally I say to her, like, well, do you feel left out? Because I still breastfeed. Birdie's 14 months, and so Birdie will often come to me for comfort, purely because at the moment she is a boob monster and just but she jokes that she says, well, actually Birdie doesn't want you, she just wants the boobs. And I'm like, well, that's actually so no, I think that no, I think she's able to settle her at bedtime as much as I can. They have their own little days when I'm at work. And no, I think they've had a special connection from very young age. I think Hannah was the first one to make her laugh. Yeah, it really didn't. And actually, she was the spitting image of Hannah, my wife, when she was born. Everyone said it.
Wow.
Didn't look anything like me until maybe 2 months ago.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It is amazing. I think genetics like that are fascinating. Well, we chose a blue-eyed donor, and I have dark brown hair and dark brown eyes, but Hannah has very blue eyes, very, very blue eyes. So we said, well, we would love if that was, something that could be passed down. And we chose a blonde-haired, blue-eyed donor purely because we wanted that very blue eyes. And Birdie has dark hair and very blue eyes. So she is very much in that aspect the spitting image of Hannah.
Yeah.
So it's very sweet seeing them next to each other. They look really, I think most people assume actually that she was from Hannah's egg.
Yeah, that's really cool. So tell me about your book that you're writing. I just learned about this morning. If you want to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not very good at promoting myself, but I am trying. It was probably when I started to connect with my donor that I thought I need to start writing some of this down, just purely for my own memories, really. And I've always turned to writing as a way of processing things as well. And then I kept writing, and then I kept writing, and I started looking into laws and how they changed, and the kind of contrast between how things like the HFEA had existed when I was born and how it does now. And I started thinking this is interesting. And there were definitely books out there. There are some really brilliant books out there talking about donor conception and talking about using donor sperm. But I hadn't yet really found one of the I wanted one that I could have read when pregnant that was a bit more, it wasn't sort of throwing facts at you and throwing research. It was more of a memoir-y style nonfiction book where someone was actually just talking about their own lived experience, but also charting how things have changed and talking about moral changes. I find it really interesting looking into things like private donors on Facebook and stuff like that. And the more I looked into it, the more I spoke to people. Loads of people really didn't know any of it. And it was an entirely new world for them. So I thought, actually, even more so, not just for people going through it, I want to have a book that I could hand to family members of people going through it and say, look, this is what they're experiencing, and this is the world that they are in now. And yeah, it just kind of, it became a way of me processing everything, and I started thinking that I could turn it into something real and not just something for me. So that is the goal, but
Yeah.
I'm fully aware that trying to get a book published isn't, well, you have, of course.
Well, I self-published, but yeah, that's,
yeah, well, I think that might end up being the way I go. And
yeah.
it's been quite interesting looking into that as an actual real goal, actually, which has always been a goal of mine. I think when I was a kid, everyone said I'd have a book published, but they definitely thought it would be about pirates or something when I was young. But no, it's given me an interesting purpose. Actually, it's something I didn't expect to go down that path of. But
yeah,
it's been really interesting.
that is, yeah. It's just, I love to see so many more resources coming out. So, and I'm happy to talk to you about self-publishing and give you any tips on that too. So, 'cause
Amazing. Yes,
it's just a steep learning curve.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. So anything else that you would want to share about, yeah, your message, or, a message to donor conceived people or to parents that have donor conceived kids? Or
I think something that I've definitely been thinking about more recently, is the fact that I think people potentially maybe expect that once they've conceived a child using a donor, that there are certain bits that, I don't know, it's again like that tick list. So there's experiences, so they've used the donor, and then there's finding the donor, and then there's finding siblings. But actually it's a lifelong journey. It isn't ever going to be something that is over by a certain point. Even if you used a donor that was known, or even if there was the identity at 18, and it was almost, I think people think they hit 18, they find the donor, and that is that done. But I know that it kind of is never ending. Not in a sort of crazy way, but I got an email 2 weeks ago from the HFEA saying, well, asking me to call them, which sent me into a tailspin of panic because I couldn't decide if it was about me or about Birdie, because they did not specify in the email. So I rang them and they said, oh, you've got another sibling that has signed up. And I had not expected to find any more. That was me done, really. I thought I'd signed up when I was 18. My mum had been really interested in that. So I think she'd signed me up for me. And I was one of the eldest. We knew that because we'd had a letter sent with all the dates that siblings were conceived. There were 13 of us, ranging from 1994, which is when I was born, to 1998, which is when my sister was born. My parents used the same donor to conceive her. And we found, well, when we signed up, no one else had. And we kind of knew that was probably a possibility because I was the only one that was 18. And then we left it a bit, and I think after a while I thought potentially my mum hadn't actually done it because I'd never got any emails, and then we suddenly, God, however many years later, well, I was 21, 22, and we got an email saying there's been a match, and we were given the details of one sibling who turned out to have another full sibling, same as I have my sister. So suddenly overnight we had two siblings.
Wow.
And then we thought, brilliant, we found them, we met up, we formed a relationship, we have a good relationship with them. And then we forgot about it. And then I get this other email again. And yet again, it's saying you have a sibling. And then we meet them. And actually, we've got two because he had a full sibling as well that hadn't signed up. So again, now suddenly we've gone from 2 to 4 to 6.
Mm.
So, and there's still 6 out there, and we kind of know, or 7 even, we know that that's just going to be an ongoing process for us. And it's weird. We were talking about it. I was talking about it with my half sister, and we were saying, this is just going to be our life, really. You know, every few years we might get an email, and there is really, unless we find all of them in the next few years, it is going to be a long process, because you think that you're never going to, and then this one has popped up all of a sudden. So it's something that you think you kind of will get used to, really. But I will never get used to being told I have a sibling there that is ready to give me their email address and add me on Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. And that you didn't know before. And it's true. It is a lifelong decision, and it impacts you across the lifespan. So yeah, it is so true. But that is, wow. I mean, and just all the feelings that come with it too. You know, like you said, you kind of connect at first and you like each other, and then you kind of go about your business, and maybe life returns to normal and don't have as much contact again.
Yeah.
But then to get that message again, you know, you
yeah,
go through it all over again.
I really thought that it would be kind of easier as such the second time around. It wasn't hard, but less intense, I guess. And I was thinking that I was a pro at this now. You know, we'll go into it and meet someone new, and we'll add him to our little strange bunch. And then you start talking to them, and we added him on Facebook. Actually, no, we didn't. I got given his full name, and I went to try and find him on Facebook, because it is the 21st century. That's how we do things now. And annoyingly, he had quite a normal name. So I was scrolling through Facebook thinking, oh God, there's loads of them. I'm never going to find him. I don't know why I couldn't just wait for him to email back, but that's not how we do things.
Yeah.
And then I clicked on one profile purely by chance, and the picture was the absolute spitting image of our donor, but just however many years younger. But it was fascinating. Wow. I just saw this picture. I was like, oh my God, it was, I laughed out loud, I think. I literally sat there going, oh my goodness. And I just thought, yep, it's never going to get any less bizarre and amazing, and you kind of just want to scream it. I think I wanted to tell everybody I knew in about 5 seconds. I wanted to send this to everyone I knew, saying, oh my God, look at this. Reality, no one else really cared that much, but I wanted to be like, holy shit, look, he's got his ears, look.
Yeah, I know. It's mind-blowing. It really is. I know. I mean, I can get excited for you because I know how that feels, and it's just hard to put into words.
It really is. And I don't think it will ever get any harder to put into words. Any less hard,
any easier, right? Any easier. So, well, that's exciting for you. And also, like, since you've been through that, you have some experience for Birdie, if she, you know, for the day that she has half siblings or siblings, and maybe goes through that journey. And
I feel like I'm glad I'm prepared for, really. And even meeting my donor, I didn't think I'd be able to relate to her with that, and I now can. I'm just glad to have that kind of, that's something there. Or even just growing up, I can talk to her and say, well, you know how your auntie, uncle, whatever, and that's how I found them, and that's how that you may find your half siblings and stuff like that. I think it's nice for her to be able to see those relationships exist, and all the strange, I've got a full sibling, I've got a half sibling, I've got step siblings, being able to see all of that. You know, there is no one simple family. But she will know very much so that is just how our family exists. So there won't be any weirdness in it. And we've got all the books and all the things you can read to her, but actually nothing beats just being able to show that that's our family, really. I'm very glad she has that growing up.
That's great. Again, like, you have such a unique perspective, and you are and I think that helps with understanding.
Definitely. Always welcome to reach out. Very happy to talk.
Thanks for listening. If you would like to follow for more content, you can go to my Instagram and Facebook account at Jana Rupnow LPC, or follow 3 Makes Baby on Instagram. You can get a copy of my book and the companion workbook to 3 Makes Baby on Amazon. If you like this podcast, be sure to like and subscribe. Have a great day.